How are you, sir?
Doing well. How you doing?
Good. When did you fly out?
I was in Paris yesterday and came to London last night, and it's good to be back here. I was at the Olympics watching volleyball a few years ago, so nice to be back to the Olympic Park, and great to be back in London.
Yeah, this is a great venue. We've been enjoying it so far. So it's been about 6 months. How's the Verizon AOL tie-up going?
It's going really well. I mean, basically, since we did the tie-up, we've done two other really large deals. One was Microsoft, so we basically have taken over the display advertising and advertising on Microsoft properties. The second piece is that we acquired Millennial Media, which is a global mobile company in the platform space for advertising. So we've been really busy. We basically have gone from 150 million users to about 700 million in 9 months that we have access to overall. So, I'd say that Verizon, from an integration standpoint, has probably been equal to those other deals. The other deals were really specific to AOL and have a bigger effect in terms of day-to-day than Verizon, but it's going really well.
And how are the orgs meshing? Are you seeing a lot of redundancies? Are we going to see more layoffs? I know we had a few back in February. Are we going to see more of that, where you're finding places where Verizon and AOL are kind of overlapping?
I mean, I think the one thing that was interesting about the Verizon deal was it wasn't really a deal of synergies, which, there's some mergers that happen which are synergistic, meaning that basically the whole premise of the deal is basically to take costs out and do a synergy-based acquisition. This deal is a growth-based acquisition for Verizon, so Verizon's looking to get into this market. There's not a huge overlap of resources at Verizon and at AOL that do the same type of jobs or functions. So I would say it's been pretty limited overall if there's been any synergies in the deal. It's mainly about growth.
So there was a story recently in the Wall Street Journal about Bob Lord leaving, which kind of implied that you would now have more time kind of to run day-to-day operations in the company. So what does that look like for you? What fingers are you interested in putting your, or what pies are you interested in?
Yeah, so first of all, going from a public company to essentially going into be a division at Verizon, probably 30 or 40% of my time changed direction. I used to spend a lot of time just dealing with the aspects of being a public company. So the areas that I'm really focused in on right now are very simple. We have 5 objectives for next year. The 2 of the objectives about growing the company and the speed we want to grow the company at. The third objective is really about moving mobile and mobile video forward overall. The fourth objective is really around how we run the company from an organizational standpoint. And the fourth objective is about talent and how do we get talent. So my schedule and my time essentially is a direct reflection of what the objectives are. And I'd say, I've said this publicly before, I think this is since I've been doing internet businesses since about 1993 or 1994, this is probably the biggest opportunity time I've seen since the start of the internet in terms of an inflection change, for the next, 10, 20 years. So we're moving as fast as we possibly can to get into some of the spaces that we see as open spaces and expanding some of the businesses we have like TechCrunch, to a much larger global stage overall.
I mean, it's very comforting to hear you use the word expanding and TechCrunch in the same sentence.
Right.
Because I think that some of the fear, of course, with the content businesses, given that they're overall a smaller portion of AOL's structure in comparison to the ad side of things, that when the company's joined up and Verizon kind of says, okay, good, we've got this ad component that we think we can leverage and use together with the mobile platforms we have, that the content was sort of second fiddle.
Well, I think content in general, well, first of all, I think your strategy as a company, somebody told me a few years ago that basically the job of a company's strategy and the executives is to constantly move to a non-commoditized area of business. And essentially things get commoditized over time because markets get made, people rush into those markets, things get commoditized. So as a leader, you constantly have to move your company to non-commoditized areas. And the great thing about content is that content basically evolves at the same rate that the world evolves. If you look at the companies that are displaying here, or the Battlefield in general, you're seeing companies and that you guys cover are basically at the forefront. The person who run Disrupt basically is using beacons and apps and tying into other infrastructure that other people have. In general, if you had gone back to when we acquired TechCrunch 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been one of the things that had won Battlefield, a company that won Battlefield. So, the content, even though it's a smaller part of our business, basically creates the largest ability for us to fight commoditization. And ideally what I'd love to see is TechCrunch in every country in the world basically covering every new thing happening in tech overall, and that's an area that basically for the rest of our business creates a massive ability for us to create a wake behind us, which will leave companies that don't have content in a commoditization wake. And that's one of our strategies. It's been successful, and I don't see us changing it.
So as a part of that discussion about the content and making sure that the expansion is heading in the right direction, one of my kind of pet things about this is the sort of ways that content is measured. Because I feel that there are some fundamental flaws with the current ways that content is being measured and evaluated for success, right? So obviously there are some things to do with the ad business where we're based on a page view model, you kind of sell things based on that. Do you think there's a point at which we will be able to move to sort of a content view model where all of the content across all platforms, TechCrunch.com, Facebook, other platforms, that is able to be monetized, of course, everybody's got to run a business, but that we're judged holistically based on growing the entire business, getting people engaged, getting them reading, getting them consuming content, versus chasing the ever-reducing effectiveness of page views?
Well, I would say, there's a structural thing you're bringing up, which, hasn't really been talked about that publicly yet in terms of the effect that if you look at mobile and mobile apps and how much consumption of content is coming on mobile apps, and on the other side, you look at the social companies and how much they're investing in content platforms. If you went back a few years ago, essentially the most important measurement was a page view on your own site in relation to what the valuation was. Today, that is a fraction of what the overall valuation is. And, we see roughly about 30% of our traffic is coming, or 30% of our readership is on social platforms overall. And that market's just developing, monetization's just developing there. And you have the same thing happening on mobile. So, some days over 50% of our impressions a day are coming through mobile on content. So, the reality is the page view has a structural problem behind it, which is if you're valuing your business on a page view and that's not where the world is, you should change that measurement. And I think that's essentially what's happening now. And the gap from a company being offline in content to going online in content was a massive gap. It took 20 years. It's still taking companies time to make that jump. The gap that's been created from online to mobile apps and social distribution is actually bigger than the original gap the internet created. So you're going to see a whole nother fleet of companies essentially trying to make that leap, but you're going to see a whole bunch of new companies start to develop that work in that new ecosystem. And so I think, measurement of how businesses are doing and how they're doing it happened in the original offline online. It's happening again. The page view is a structurally flawed metric to measure an entire business right now in the content space, and for that matter in the advertising space overall. So I think that will change. It'll lag behind the actual consumer changes, but it'll eventually change.
And so do you think as a part of reevaluating the way we measure those things, that the sort of display ads as the primary source of inventory is on the wane? Like, is the display ad business going away? I mean,
I traveled to Europe with one of our lead engineers who's a founder of one of the companies we acquired, Michael Hyman from Vidable, and he sent me the New York Times article about the ad that was maybe a day or two ago about how bad the ads are on the internet and how bad the experience is, overall. And I said to him, Michael, this is the single largest opportunity is you have people writing articles about how bad the experience is with advertising overall. And it's, when people shoot arrows at things that are valuable, they don't shoot arrows at things. If they're not talking about it, you should be more worried. Right. The reality is the monetization from advertising on the internet and mobile is a very important ecosystem. it's really, really poorly done right now overall. And you can look at it from two angles. You can say it's poorly done and, oh, that's a real shame. Or you look at it and say it's poorly done and it's the most important information space in the world. And if we do a good job innovating, it's probably a big business opportunity. So one of the objective and key results we have as a business is essentially injecting a lot more consumer measurement and metrics into content and into advertising overall. Almost every other part of the internet ecosystem, from commerce to messaging to other things, has a lot more direct involvement from consumers in deciding whether things work or not overall. I think content and advertising are spaces that are ripe for disruption, and you have essentially consumers crying out for it, for that disruption. I mean, they're writing public articles begging for us to change how the ecosystems work, and we've let it go on for too long.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about the lack of tolerances on mobile that I think spells all this out. Because on mobile, you're much less tolerant to a small thing being wrong than you are on a desktop, where you have it's kind of more fudge room.
Right.
So when an ad eats up processing cycles and therefore battery, or when it disrupts the experience of scrolling a page and you have to re-find your place, all that stuff, there's less tolerance for it. So it seems like there's a big opportunity to say, let's make honest, really efficient ads that still pay the bills, but offer people an experience that's much more suitable.
Well, I mean, we talk about it inside the company this way, which is, mobile is your best non-human friend. And if your best human friend, every time you interacted with your best human friend, they interrupted everything you were doing to put up pop-up ads or those things in general, they probably wouldn't be your best human friend anymore. So I think the same thing is true on your best non-human friend, which is your mobile machine. And it really is a machine. It's a machine that is an incredible machine for the future of humanity. And the reality is that future and that machine should not be driven by the least common denominator on the advertising experience. And I think that won't happen. I believe fundamentally that in the next couple of years you'll probably see some very significant innovation happening in advertising and in content on the phone also, or the mobile device.
Well, it's good. So let's shift a little bit. So Marissa Mayer earlier this year said that Yahoo merging with AOL wouldn't make any sense. And this is before the whole Verizon thing. And then in April, also before Verizon, you were saying that Yahoo and AOL was a dead notion. Yesterday, Fran Shammo from Verizon was asked about Verizon buying Yahoo. And she said that, maybe not right now, but if it makes sense, sure. So what scenario would you see making sense for Verizon to buy Yahoo alongside AOL, and how would those mesh?
Well, first I would just say that, in the history of AOL, since I've been there and since a bunch of our folks have been there, we have been and are in a situation where our best option is to focus in on our exact strategy and only do things that meet our exact strategy overall. And I think that the Yahoo AOL rumors predate me at AOL. They've been going on for a long time, like maybe 10 years or something. So I would basically say, in the process we are now, our entire company has already seen our 2016 strategy. They saw it in November, right before Thanksgiving. We have a meeting actually tomorrow in New York. I'm flying back tonight to essentially show the same exact strategy again there. And I would say that the strategy slides I'm showing have nothing about any other company on them, because if you look at our company today and the deals we've done in the last 9 months, essentially AOL has already moved from a company that when content wasn't popular, we invested in content. When video wasn't that popular, we invested in video. When programmatic advertising, people didn't know what it was, we invested in that overall. So our success and our history and the Verizon deal have been because we've only stayed focused on doing what our exact strategy is. And I wouldn't comment on Yahoo, because the only chance of any deals happening in the future of the company only matter of whether or not they actually fit into those 5 OKRs we're going after as a company. And I think, I think Fran's comments, that he made as a public company executive, when somebody asks you, would you do this if it made sense? You'd answer, yes, I would do that if it made sense overall. So you're hearing it directly from me. I'm in charge of AOL strategy. We're focused on AOL overall, and we have been. And I think Yahoo's a strong company, and there are very few assets at that size overall. So I'm sure whatever Yahoo does, they'll make the right decisions when they move forward.
So if you went back to yourself before taking on the AOL job, and you looked at a company like AOL and said, hey, they're part of this other company, they really need to be spun out, they need to be their own thing, and then I need to get them to a place where they're successful. Do you think that you would look at what you did, taking it out of there, building it, almost doubling the value, selling it to Verizon, as that a great end game for you, or would you like to have made it a sustainable, standalone business that had the components it was missing?
Well, one is, you got to remember the time frame. When I went into Time Warner at AOL, I think there was, somebody sent me an article right when I was starting. I don't know if it was written right before I started, a little bit before, but it was probably within the last year before I started at AOL. And I think it was from Fast Company, and it basically had a picture of vultures picking apart AOL, and it basically said AOL is going to die overall. And so, job number one, I spent the first 10 months or 12 months of the company basically preparing the company to spin out of Time Warner. And when I look back at it now, I think we've been very, very successful about very quickly deciding our strategy, boldly investing behind it, and going through all the lumps we had to take to get to where we ended up with the Verizon deal. But I'd also say we didn't do the Verizon deal because it was the end of the line. We did the Verizon deal because I think mobile is going to be the single most important thing, in the future. And again, internally, I say fire, wheel, and mobile. Those are the things that are really important in the world. In world evolution, and Verizon's the most important company in the wireless space in the United States, with a huge opportunity to scale some of the things we're doing at AOL to a global capacity. So I didn't do the Verizon deal because it was we doubled the value of the company and it was time to get off track of what we're doing. I did that deal because I think AOL will probably be a much more important company in the future than it is today, based on doing the Verizon deal, and I'm really excited. I mean, I'm enthusiastically engaged and working very hard with Verizon, and the rest of our team is, because I think everyone believes it's one of the largest opportunities in business in front of us.
So you've committed to stay on for a couple of years with AOL at the very least. Let's say that runs its natural course. Whatever happens, you'd be like, I've done what I feel I want to do here. Do you think of a CEO of another established companies in your future? Do you want to get up here and pitch on the battlefield, start a new company? Like, what would be your next step?
So, just for me personally, I said this to the Verizon executives, Lowell McAdams and Marnie Walden, and the Verizon board, and to our board at AOL, is I wasn't going to do anything that I wasn't committed to. So my plan is to keep running AOL and keep expanding it globally. You've seen how aggressive we've been since the Verizon deal happened. And I'd say the other thing that's probably different is, I started my career off by starting a newspaper. I went to a startup, Starwave, which was one of the first content companies in the world for the internet out in Seattle. I worked for Paul Allen. That company got bought by Disney. I left that company. We had started another content company. That company we took public overall, which is the dream of many, probably the people in the other room here. I then went to Google. While I was at Google, I started Associated Content with Luke Beatty. That company eventually got sold to Yahoo. I've basically done a lot of the stuff at Google I wanted to do overall. Was at Google's first office outside of Mountain View was my apartment at 86 in Columbus and Manhattan. And so I've had in the last 20 years probably one of the most differentiated experiences. And I think at this point, I'm going to be 45 in a few days. And I don't look at the world right now of like what I'm going to do next, or I'm looking at the world of what am I most passionate about, and what I'm most passionate about is being at Verizon and seeing if we can really grow what will hopefully become one of the largest mobile media companies in the world. So I've had the experience of being at one of those tables behind the curtain at the startup area, and been involved in things like Battlefield before. I love that, but I'm playing on a much bigger battlefield now, and it's a lot of fun. And I also really enjoy, I would just say, part of career and life is choosing who you want to work with. We have just an incredibly talented group of 6,000 people now at AOL that have been through a battle together, and I know we're really focused on the future, so I'm enthusiastic, passionate, and excited about what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.